The encounter. The human starship touched down on the edge of a scarred plateau where the alien winds howled through canyons carved by time and storms. His name was Daniel, and though he was only one man among many explorers who had crossed into alien lands before him, he carried the weight of curiosity that defined humanity. He was warned before setting foot here that this planet was not safe, and that there lived a girl whom every alien feared so much that they spoke her name in whispers, and silence soon followed. They told him she was cursed, that her presence drew disaster, and that even her people had banished her to the ruins at the farthest corner of the planet. Daniel listened, but he did not turn back. There was something in those fearful voices that only made him want to see with his own eyes. The ruins stretched before him like broken bones of an ancient city, towers of stone, crumbled under the sky, and vines twisted through shattered walls. He walked slowly, the crunch of dust beneath his boots echoing in the stillness. He felt the weight of unseen eyes, but he pressed on. He had no weapon in hand, only a sense of determination. Humans were often called reckless by the galaxy, but Daniel carried another trait that few understood, a kind of stubborn courage that refused to bend to fear. It was there in the center of the ruins that he finally saw her. The alien girl stood alone, her figure framed by the glow of a fractured crystal spire behind her. She was taller than he expected, slender yet radiating a quiet power. Her skin shimmered faintly with strange patterns that shifted like waves of fire, and her eyes burned a deep shade that seemed both tragic and fierce. She looked at him not with anger, but with weary expectation, as if she had seen countless intruders before who came only to curse her and flee. Daniel stopped a few paces away, his heart steady. The silence stretched between them, and in that moment the air itself seemed to hold its breath. He could sense the fear that others felt around her, a fear born not of truth but of stories repeated until they became chains. He thought of all the warnings given to him, of all the hands that tried to hold him back. And instead of stepping away, instead of drawing a weapon or turning to run, he lowered himself onto one knee. His head bowed, his eyes steady, he knelt before the girl everyone feared. The act was simple, yet it cracked the silence like thunder. The girl tilted her head, confusion flashing across her face. For years she had only seen terror reflected back at her. To see someone kneel, not in submission but in respect, made her breath catch. She did not move closer, she did not speak, but her eyes softened just slightly. Daniel did not know that across the planet his gesture was not hidden. The alien world had eyes everywhere, and the ruins were wired into ancient surveillance channels that broadcast his every movement. In cities far away, millions of screens flickered alive. Aliens gathered around plazas and homes, staring in disbelief, as a human showed reverence to the one they had called cursed. Generations of fear began to waver in that single instant. He lifted his head, meeting her gaze, and though he still said nothing, his expression spoke louder than words. He saw her not as a curse, not as a monster, but as someone who had carried unbearable loneliness. She took a step forward, the stones cracking under her bare feet, her voice low and rough as if unused for years. "You do not fear me," she whispered. Daniel only shook his head, his voice calm, steady, and unbroken. "No, I do not." The wind stirred between them, lifting dust into the twilight sky. Far away, unseen leaders of the planet leaned forward in alarm, watching the moment unfold. For the first time in countless years, the girl was not alone, and the man who had knelt before her had unknowingly drawn the attention of an entire world. These fearful eyes of the planet, the ruins know, longer felt empty as Daniel rose from his kneeling posture, his steady gaze fixed on the alien girl whose name he still did not know. She studied him in silence, her strange eyes glowing faintly as if fire and sorrow lived together inside them. He felt the weight of her loneliness pressing against him like a heavy storm cloud, and though his instincts told him that the entire world wanted him gone, he did not step away. He had seen her pain, and he chose to remain standing before it. What he did not realize was that his every movement was being carried across the skies of this alien world. Entire cities were watching, as if the ruins themselves had become a stage and the human a bold performer. Great squares filled with citizens who had been taught from childhood to fear the cursed girl. They gathered in silence, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others whispering that the man was a fool, who would be destroyed in an instant. Yet none of them could look away. The image of him kneeling played again and again on the glowing screens and stirred something they could not yet name. The girl's voice finally broke the silence. "You are not like them," she said, her words flowing with quiet strength, though her tone was edged with disbelief. "They run when they see me, but you stayed." Daniel nodded, his voice calm but firm. Fear is a chain, he answered, and chains break when you choose to look past them. Her expression wavered, and for the first time in many years she did not feel like the monster others had made her into. Deep beneath the capital city, the council of leaders watched the same feed. The chamber was filled with tension as the elders shifted uneasily in their seats. The cursed girl was supposed to remain a symbol of terror, a reminder to keep the population obedient, but now this human was changing the story in front of the entire world. One elder slammed his hand against the table, declaring that the human must be removed before his actions planted seeds of rebellion. Another argued that perhaps it was already too late, for the seeds had been planted the moment he knelt. Meanwhile, back at the ruins, Daniel sensed the pressure in the air. He was not naive and knew that he was being observed, though he could not have guessed the scale. He watched as the girl lowered her gaze and wrapped her arms around herself as though shielding her heart. "They said I was cursed," she whispered, "that anyone who stood near me would suffer. That is why they left me here." Daniel stepped closer, his boots crunching softly against the broken stones. "And yet here I stand," he replied without hesitation. She looked up at him again, confusion flickering in her expression, as if hope was trying to break free from the cage of despair. All across the planet, citizens whispered to one another. Could it be possible that the girl was not cursed? Could it be that the humans' courage revealed something they had been blind to for generations? Rumors spread like wildfire as the council scrambled to suppress them. Soldiers were dispatched toward the ruins with orders to watch closely and intervene if the human attempted anything that threatened their control. The alien girl turned slightly, her gaze drifting toward the distant horizon where the suns dipped lower. She spoke again, her voice quieter than before. "If you stay near me, they will come. They will not let this continue." Daniel smiled faintly, though his eyes were serious. "Then let them come. I did not cross the stars to run from shadows." The winds rose, carrying the faint hum of old machines hidden in the ruins. Screens across the world flickered with the image of the human and the girl standing side by side. The citizens stared, and for the first time in centuries, the legend of the cursed one began to tremble. In the council chambers, the elders exchanged fearful glances. One whispered the words they had all dreaded to hear. "He is breaking the story." The girl felt her heart beating faster, her long solitude cracking like ice under the warmth of something unfamiliar. She could not yet name it, but she knew that the human's presence was changing her. Daniel simply stood by her side, firm and unshaken, unaware that billions of eyes were fixed upon him, and that his act of kneeling had already begun to unravel the foundation of an entire world. Secrets beneath the fear. Night settled over the ruins, painting the broken towers in silver light, while Daniel remained beside the alien girl who still studied him with a mixture of doubt and wonder. She had never seen anyone stay this close for so long. Her people had always fled when she appeared, yet this human stood calm and unwavering. His presence stirred old feelings buried beneath years of silence, feelings she had tried to lock away. Finally, she spoke again, her voice quiet and filled with hesitation. "They say I was born cursed because of the power inside me." She lifted her hands, and faint streams of light shimmered across her skin, glowing like threads of fire. "It frightened them," she continued. "They believed the power would consume the planet, so they cast me out and told the world I was dangerous." Daniel listened intently, his expression steady and kind. He had heard tales of exile before, but none like this. She continued her story, telling him how she had lived alone since childhood in the ruins, with only whispers of her name reaching the people beyond. When storms raged, she endured them alone. When hunger struck, she scavenged among the remains of a forgotten civilization. Her eyes glistened as she spoke of nights when she cried to the empty sky, asking why she was left behind. "I was never a monster," she said, "but they needed one, and so they chose me." Daniel's fists tightened at his sides, not in anger toward her, but in anger toward the cruelty of a people who chained a child with fear. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, so it was only for her. "You were not cursed, you were abandoned because they were afraid of what they did not understand. Humanity has seen this before, and we learned that fear can twist truth into chains." Her breath caught at his words because no one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever dared to say she was not the curse they claimed. Far away in the cities, the broadcast continued, and the people watched with growing unease. They saw their feared symbol speak with trembling honesty and a human listening without judgment. Some whispered that perhaps they had been deceived, others clung to the old belief that she was dangerous. The council in the capital grew restless, and one of the elders shouted that the feed must be cut before the population began to question everything. But another hesitated, for he knew it was already too late. Seeds of doubt had already spread through every corner of their society. At the ruins, the alien girl looked down at her glowing hands and whispered that she could not control the energy inside her. Sometimes it surged in storms of light strong enough to shatter stone, and she feared hurting anyone who stood near. Daniel did not step back. Instead, he gently extended his hand toward her, though he kept it a respectful distance away. "Then let me help you," he said softly. His words were not loud, but they struck her heart like a blade cutting through years of loneliness. She blinked at him, uncertain whether to laugh or weep. "Help me? How could you help me when your kind has never touched power like this?" she asked. Daniel's gaze did not waver. "Humanity has survived death worlds. We have faced storms and beasts stronger than us. We have endured because we learn and adapt. If this is your gift, then it can be understood and guided, not feared." Her chest tightened as hope slipped into her guarded heart. The glow on her hands flickered softer, like a candle touched by wind. She whispered her name to him, something she had not spoken aloud to anyone for years, and when he repeated it gently as though it was something precious, she felt tears sting her eyes. In the shadows beyond the ruins, soldiers crept closer, their weapons ready, their orders strict. They had been told the human must not be allowed to turn the cursed girl into something else, something that people might believe in. Yet as they watched, they hesitated, for even hardened warriors found it difficult to strike when the evidence of their own eyes clashed with the stories they were raised to believe. The girl looked to the horizon, sensing danger approaching. She turned back to Daniel, her voice urgent. "They are coming," she warned. He nodded slowly, as if he had expected this from the start. "Then let them come," he said again, but this time his words carried the weight of defiance, not just against soldiers, but against an entire world built on fear. These ruins shook faintly, as if the planet itself was listening, and far above the moons cast their cold light on the unlikely pair. For the first time in her life, the girl did not feel cursed. She felt seen, and with that fragile spark of hope, she stood taller beside the human who had dared to kneel. The rising suspicion. Soldiers reached the edges of the ruins, their eyes scanning the broken walls through the dim light of the moons. They saw the human standing near the girl, and they felt unease stirring in their hearts, for the stories they were raised on did not match the sight before them. They had been told she would be surrounded by storms of deadly energy, yet here she stood, calm, her glow faint, as she spoke quietly with the stranger. One of the soldiers whispered that perhaps the curse was never real, but the commander silenced him quickly, reminding them of their orders. In the capital city, the council chamber was in chaos. The elders argued over what must be done, their voices rising with fear. One declared that the human must be executed before he inspired rebellion, while another warned that killing him in front of the entire planet would only make him a martyr. The screens had not been shut off in time, and the people were already divided. Some demanded answers, others clung to fear, but all were watching closely. Meanwhile, in the ruins, Daniel stood still, sensing the shifting air around them. He could feel that they were not alone, though the girl's tense posture confirmed it even before she spoke. "They are here," she said softly, her eyes narrowing toward the shadows. Daniel's voice was calm, steady, like a rock against the tide. "Then let them show themselves." The soldiers stepped forward, weapons drawn, forming a circle around them. The commander barked that the human was under arrest and that the cursed girl must be contained again. Daniel raised his hand slightly, not in surrender, but to show he carried no weapon. His voice carried firm conviction as he spoke. "I will not move away from her. She is not cursed, and you know it." The soldiers hesitated at his words, their grips on their weapons tightening. For many years they had believed the council without question, but now they saw doubt forming in the eyes of their own comrades. The girl stood silently at Daniel's side, her heart pounding, for never before had anyone defended her so openly. She whispered that they would kill him if he resisted, but Daniel shook his head. "I would rather stand against lies than kneel before them." Across the planet, the broadcast captured every word, and the people murmured as they watched. Some wept, others shouted at the screens, unable to reconcile the truth before their eyes with the teachings they had followed all their lives. The myth of the cursed girl was unraveling thread by thread, and the council knew they were losing control. The commander stepped forward, raising his weapon. "Enough," he shouted. "If you do not step away, human, then you will share her fate." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with the weight of decision. Daniel stood his ground, his expression calm, though fire burned in his eyes. "Then I will share it," he said. His words struck not only the soldiers but the billions watching from their homes and cities. The girl's chest ached with emotions she could not contain. She had lived her entire life as a shadow, a warning, a curse, but this man had chosen to stand with her, even when death was the price. She turned her glowing eyes toward the soldiers, and for the first time her power flickered uncontrolled. Streams of light ran across her skin, casting wild shadows through the ruins. The soldiers flinched, unsure whether to fire or flee. In that moment, Daniel placed his hand gently on her shoulder, his calm presence grounding her storm. He whispered to her in a steady voice, "You are not alone anymore." The power faded slightly, though the glow still lingered, and she breathed deeply, regaining control. The soldiers stared in disbelief, for no one had ever calmed her before, no one had even tried. The commander lowered his weapon, uncertain, his training clashing with the evidence before him. He glanced at his men and saw doubt reflected in their eyes. The council's grip was slipping even here among its loyal guards. Daniel held his ground, knowing the night had only just begun, and that the true storm was still to come. Far above, the moons watched silently, as if they too bore witness to history being written in the ruins where a human's defiance had shaken the foundation of an entire world. The human's defiance, the ruins stood silent under the pale glow of the moons as Daniel faced the circle of armed soldiers who waited for the command to strike. Their weapons hummed with power, yet none fired, for their eyes shifted uneasily between the human and the girl. The commander barked again, demanding obedience, but the hesitation in the ranks was clear. Daniel's calm voice rose above the hum of energy weapons, steady and unbroken. "You see her standing here, you see her power contained, and yet you fear a story, not the truth." The girl lowered her head as if ashamed, but he stepped closer to her, making sure the world could see that he would not turn away. Across cities and homes, the broadcast continued, and the people watched in silence. Many had expected the human to fall quickly, but instead they saw him standing firm against armed soldiers, with nothing but conviction in his voice. One soldier finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Commander, he has been here long enough to be destroyed if the curse was real. Perhaps we were deceived." The words caused a ripple through the squad. The commander's eyes burned with fury, and he raised his weapon, threatening to fire. Daniel stepped in front of the girl, shielding her with his own body, though he carried no armor, no shield, only a choice. His words came sharp and unflinching. "If you fire, you will strike me first." The people across the planet gasped, for the image of a man defending the one they were told to hate broke centuries of belief. Some wept openly, others shouted in anger, but none could deny the sight. The council in the capital erupted in rage, demanding the broadcast be silenced. Yet their efforts came too late. The entire population had already seen the human's defiance. The girl stared at Daniel with wide eyes, her chest heavy with emotions she had never felt before. She whispered to him that he was a fool for risking his life for her. He answered softly, without breaking his gaze from the soldiers. "Perhaps, but I would rather be a fool who stands for truth than a coward who bows to fear." She felt her throat tighten, for no one had ever chosen her side, not once in her life. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably, their weapons lowering just slightly as their doubt grew. They had been trained to obey without question, but the human's courage made them falter. The commander roared that the human was corrupting them and ordered the squad to arrest him immediately. Yet none moved forward. Instead, they glanced at one another, waiting for someone else to step first. Daniel took a slow breath, then spoke loud enough for all to hear, and for the billions watching through the hidden eyes of the ruins. "If your leaders must build their rule on fear, then they are weaker than they claim. If one girl standing alone frightens them, then perhaps the curse was never hers but theirs." The words struck like a blade, cutting through the lies that had bound the people for generations. Citizens across the planet repeated the words in whispers that grew into shouts in the streets. The council had tried to keep power through control, but now their lies cracked like glass. The commander raised his weapon once more, desperate to regain authority, but the girl stepped forward beside Daniel. Her glow surged brighter than ever before, bathing the ruins in silver fire. She spoke for all to hear, her voice no longer trembling. "I was never the curse you feared. I was your daughter, your sister, your kin, and you abandoned me." The truth echoed through the ruins and across the planet, and no soldier could silence it. Daniel placed his hand lightly on her arm, grounding her power once more. His voice was steady as he spoke into the night. "The choice is yours," he told the soldiers. "You can stand with lies or you can stand with truth. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of weapons lowering one by one. The commander's rage twisted his face, but even he could see the loyalty of his men slipping from his grasp. Far above in the capital, the council stared in dread for the image of soldiers lowering their weapons before the cursed girl was now burned. Into the eyes of billions, Daniel had done what no one believed possible. He had turned fear into doubt and doubt into defiance. The planet trembled at the shift, and the night carried the first sparks of rebellion. The breaking point. Ruins stood tense with silence as the soldiers lowered their weapons one after another, leaving the commander alone with his rage. His voice cracked as he shouted at them to obey, but no one moved to raise their rifles again. Their eyes were no longer filled with fear of the girl. Instead, they carried something more dangerous to the council doubt. The commander cursed them all and tried to step forward, but the human blocked his path, unarmed yet unyielding. Daniel's voice was sharp and cold as steel. "If you want her, you must go through me." The moons lit the girl's glowing skin as her power flickered with unstable light. She felt torn between terror and hope, for never had she been so close to unleashing her strength. Yet never had she felt so close to being understood. The soldiers stepped back, wary of the storm building around her. Daniel turned to her, his hand brushing her arm, steadying her. "Control it," he whispered. "Not because they tell you to, but because you are stronger than their fear." His calm tone reached her heart, and the wild energy began to settle, though its fire still danced just beneath the surface. Far across the planet, the broadcast fed images of this standoff into every home and every crowded plaza. The people whispered and argued as they watched, some clinging to the fear they had always known, while others shouted that they had been deceived for generations. Children asked their parents why the human did not burn when he stood beside her, and the parents found no answers. The truth was spreading faster than the council could contain it. In the council chamber, panic grew. Elders pounded their fists, demanding immediate action. One declared that if the soldiers could not kill the girl, then the military fleet would. Another warned that firing on the ruins would destroy the illusion completely, for it would prove they feared their own lies. Still they argued, but their power was slipping, and they knew it. Back in the ruins, the commander finally acted. With a cry of fury, he aimed his weapon at Daniel, determined to silence him. The girl screamed as the weapon fired, but in that instant her power surged on instinct. A wall of blazing light erupted between Daniel and the commander, the shot dissolving harmlessly into the glow. The ruins shook under the force, and the soldiers stumbled back, shielding their eyes. The commander fell to the ground, trembling as the light seared the stones around him. Billions gasped as they saw the truth unfold. The girl's power was not wild destruction, but fierce protection. She had shielded the human with instinct, not malice. Her voice rang across the ruins, steady and strong. "I was never the monster you feared. My gift was to protect, not to destroy." The soldiers stared at her, their doubt turning into something close to belief. Daniel stepped forward, his voice rising above the chaos. "She has been your shield all along, and you turned her into your enemy." The crowd watching through their screens erupted with cries of disbelief and anger. Protests began in the streets of the capital, as citizens demanded the council explain why they had lied for so long. Some shouted for rebellion, others for freedom, but all agreed that the story of the curse was broken forever. The girl felt her chest tighten with emotions she had buried all her life. She looked at Daniel, her voice trembling. "Why did you stay?" she asked softly. "Why did you risk everything for me?" Daniel met her gaze, his expression calm but fierce. "Because no one deserves to be chained by fear. Because you were never alone, even if you believed it." Her tears fell, though her glow did not fade. For the first time she felt the chains of exile loosen, and for the first time she felt hope take root. The soldiers who once came to drag her back lowered their weapons completely, their faces marked with shame and quiet respect. The commander lay defeated, unable to raise his voice against the tide that had turned. Far away in the capital, the elders watched in horror as their power crumbled. One whispered what they all feared. "The people no longer believe us." The breaking point had come, and nothing could restore the old order. As the night deepened, the ruins no longer felt like a place of exile, but the birthplace of something new. The girl stood taller, her glow steady as Daniel remained by her side. The planet itself seemed to tremble as if it sensed the rise of change. The storm had begun, and there was no turning back. The revelation and the choice. The dawn rose over the shattered ruins, casting golden light on broken towers that had once been symbols of despair. Now they glowed with the birth of something new, Daniel stood beside the alien girl who was no longer just the cursed outcast of her people, but a beacon that billions had seen through their screens. The soldiers had lowered their weapons, the commander lay defeated, and the council was powerless to hide what had unfolded. The world waited, holding its breath as truth fought to break through centuries of lies. The girl's glow shimmered softly, no longer wild or untamed, but steady like a flame, learning its purpose. Her voice rose clear across the ruins. I was never the curse you were told to fear. My power was not meant to destroy but to protect. For years I begged to be seen for what I truly was, yet you turned from me. Her words carried weight not only to those around her but to the billions watching. People in cities and villages listened and wept, their voices joining in shouts that filled the streets. They had believed lies for so long, yet the sight of her standing tall beside a human burned those lies away. Daniel looked at her with quiet pride, his voice strong as he addressed the soldiers who still lingered. You see her now not as a curse, but as your own. The time has come to decide whether you serve fear or truth. One soldier dropped his weapon to the ground, his eyes fixed on the girl with shame. Another followed until the sound of weapons striking stone echoed like thunder. The commander screamed for loyalty, but none obeyed. In the capital, the council chamber descended into chaos as the protests outside swelled into a storm. Citizens poured through the streets shouting her name, demanding an end to the rule of fear. The elders shouted orders, but no one listened, for the people no longer believed. The tide had turned, and their voices held no power against the rising roar of rebellion. Back in the ruins, the girl turned to Daniel, her eyes glistening. I do not know if they can ever forgive me, she whispered. He shook his head softly. You have nothing to be forgiven for. It was they who wronged you, and now it is they who must choose what they will become. His words steadied her, and she felt strength flow where once there had only been sorrow. She stepped forward onto the cracked stones, her glow rising brighter until the ruins shone as if alive again. Her voice carried across the world through the old surveillance channels that had once been used to shame her. I am not your curse, she declared. I am your shield, and I will not hide any longer. If you accept me, I will protect you. But if you reject me, I will still stand tall, for I know now that my gift is not a burden. Her declaration spread like fire through the cities. People fell to their knees in the streets, others shouted with joy, and still others cried as they realized the truth. Even those who had feared her most began to feel shame that they had allowed a child to be cast out to bear the weight of their fears. The rebellion became unity as voices called for change, not in whispers but in thunderous cries. Daniel stood by her side, knowing his journey had reshaped not only her fate, but the fate of an entire world. He had not come as a conqueror, nor as a savior, yet by kneeling he had lit the spark of transformation. The girl looked at him with gratitude in her eyes. You gave me hope when I had none. Without you, I would still be alone. He smiled faintly, his voice gentle. You were never alone. You only needed someone to remind you. The suns rose higher, bathing the planet in light as the council's power crumbled and the people began to rise with courage they had never known. The cursed girl was no longer cursed, and the human who knelt before her had become a legend. Together they stepped forward into a world no longer bound by fear, but by the promise of truth and unity. And so the story of the girl feared by all and the man who dared to kneel became more than a moment in the ruins. It became a legend carried across the stars, a reminder that sometimes the greatest power lies not in weapons or armies, but in the courage to see another as they truly are. A legend across the stars. The planet had changed forever. The council that once ruled with fear was scattered, their voices drowned out by the roar of their own people. Cities that had once whispered about the cursed girl now chanted her name openly in the streets. The soldiers who once came to bind her now lowered their weapons in shame, and some even swore loyalty to her protection. The people who had been blind finally opened their eyes, and what they saw was not a monster but a guardian who had carried her burden alone for too long. Daniel stood with her at the heart of the ruins where the broken towers gleamed in the morning light. His journey had begun with nothing more than curiosity and stubborn courage, but it ended with the rebirth of a world. He had not used weapons or threats, he had not commanded armies or carried power greater than others. All he had done was kneel in respect to someone the universe had cast aside, and that simple act had reshaped the destiny of millions. The girl felt the weight of her long years in exile fall from her shoulders. For the first time, she stood not as a symbol of fear, but as a beacon of hope. Her gift was no longer a curse, it was a shield for her people, and her people were ready to accept it. She looked at Daniel with tears in her eyes, her voice trembling with both gratitude and strength. "You gave me back my name," she whispered. "You gave me back my future." Daniel's expression was calm as he answered her. "You were always more than their lies. You only needed to see it." His words carried a warmth that wrapped around her heart, stronger than any chain of fear. The ruins, that had once been her prison, now felt like the beginning of something greater, a place where history would forever remember the moment fear was broken by courage. Far above the planet, the stars glittered, and ships across the galaxy carried the story outward. Other worlds would hear of the human who knelt before the girl everyone feared, and they too would speak of it. The tale spread beyond one planet, becoming a legend whispered among travelers and sung in stories of freedom. Humanity had once been mocked as reckless and weak, but now the galaxy would remember that humans carried the power to change entire worlds, not with destruction, but with defiance, compassion, and respect. The girl raised her hand, and the glow of her power stretched across the sky, painting light over the ruins. The people watching below cheered with voices that shook the air, for they knew they were witnessing the birth of a new era. Daniel stood quietly beside her, letting the moment belong to her, for it was her story, her rise from the shadows of exile to the strength of acceptance. Together they stepped forward, leaving behind the broken stones of fear and walking into the future side by side. Their story would not end here, but it would always be remembered as the moment when chains shattered and hope rose. A human's simple kneeling had given a world back its courage and a girl back her place among her people. The end.